Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of our new podcast called Writers to Writers. It's a podcast where professional writers offer tips and advice to other writers. Now, I'm Suzanne Lawrence. I'm the author of over 40 published books, and I'm also a transformational law of attraction coach for writers. And I'm here with my co-host. Hi, Simon, who tell us about you.
Hello, how are you? Yeah, good.
Yeah, and what do you do, Simon?
Well, I'm the author of 21 novels and more than 100 non-fiction books for children and young adults. So, thanks for joining us today for what promises to be a fascinating conversation.
Good, good. And you invited a special guest for us. So would you introduce her and then she can tell us a little bit about what she does?
Well, this is Mandy who's with us today, so I'm not going to introduce her. I'm going to let Mandy tell us all about her and what she does. So, what do you do, Mandy?
Yes, I'm an author. I've got 11 books published. I've been in anthologies. I'm a freelance writer, secretary of my local writing group, and I'm just obsessed with writing, to be honest with you.
Wow, wow. I'm the only one without an English accent. I feel left out. I could fake it, but it wouldn't be very good. So I'll just stick with I have. All right, so that's interesting. We've got plenty of experience between the three of us. So today
Yes.
we're going to be tackling one of the most common questions we get asked, and that is, where do you get your ideas? And sometimes it makes you laugh when people ask that, but sometimes it makes you groan. So what do you think, Simon? Do you get asked that question a lot?
Well, like we've said before, sometimes it seems like it's a bit of an elephant in the room, really. I mean, it's frustrating. I've been asked it for years, whether it was from when I was teaching adults at the university, or whether it was during school visits or something like that. It was always a frustrating question to be asked because people were assuming, I suppose, that there was some secret source or some magical well that we all draw these ideas from and everything. But the truth is actually more complex than that. I mean, in some ways, ideas they're all around us. I mean, they're from news stories, magazines, pictures, photographs, other books, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. TV and movies, even video games, if you're into that. History, in my case, a constant source of inspiration, and then there's personal experiences, family and friends, even pets, and of course, one thing we have to mention is that ideas sometimes come from dreams. Often not the entire novel, but sometimes just a little snippet that sets you off on your journey.
Yeah, I remember Stephanie, I can't remember her last name, who wrote the Twilight series, the books about the vampires. She said she just dreamed the books and she woke up and wrote them. And I was like, give me a break. I have never had a dream where I can just get up and write a book. Wouldn't that be great? But yeah, I guess some people do get ideas from dreams, so that's good. What about you, Mandy? Where do you get your ideas?
Same as Simon, really. I mean, you can grab ideas from anywhere. I mean, you're sitting in a coffee shop and you overhear a conversation and you think that's really interesting, and you build from there. I mean, one of my books, funny enough, the first scene was a dream,
Really?
and that
Okay.
started me off, right? And the other thing is, I mean, you can use writing prompts, and I love writing prompts, and
Mhm.
they sort of spark something. So you just sort of carry on with it. Sometimes they have legs, sometimes they don't. But then you just keep that little nugget because it might come in handy for something you do later on.
Mhm.
Um, so partly dreams, partly overheard conversations, and then as all of us know, sometimes something hits you, like subconsciously, and you
Mhm.
think that's pretty cool. I like that idea, and then you just think, how far can I go with this idea? Not all of them work, but some do.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, well, I must be eating the wrong stuff at night because I don't ever have any dreams that turn into my writing ideas. But I'll look into that since you guys
Yeah.
both think the same dreams work for you. What about research though, Simon? I know you do a lot of research, don't you, for your time travel books and historical type stuff. When you're doing the research, does that ever give you other ideas?
Oh yes, I mean, sometimes if I'm researching one thing, it'll set me off on a path to something else. And as Mandy says, sometimes you might find something that it's just a little snippet of information, and you think, oh, that's pretty cool. I might be able to use that again somewhere down the road, and you might not use it at all. Um, I've come across things sometimes that have been about some ancient civilization that I probably knew about. I knew about this ancient civilization. I'd heard of it and everything, but hadn't really done much research into it. And I thought, oh, I'll use that somewhere further along, like in another story. But then to this date, I probably still haven't used it for anything. But I'm not throwing the folder out with the information in it. That's for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
I went to university and got a degree in history, so I'm quite well versed in most of that stuff. But some historical periods are more interesting than others, and also some of them are more suitable for adapting for stories than others. I mean, I wrote my Stone of the Seer series of books, the trilogy, and they're set mostly in the time of the English Civil War, which is a very interesting period of history, whereas some other periods of history are just not suitable. They're just not exciting enough. So research, yes, I've got ideas when I've been doing that.
Okay. Yeah, that's worked for me too. In fact, I wrote one book. It was a nonfiction book about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. And I did that under assignment for a children's educational publisher. So I did all this research to write that book. And then after I wrote it, the publisher came back to me later and said, wow, we love the book you did that was nonfiction. Now could you take the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire and turn it into a novel, middle grade novel? So I had all the research, I knew all the facts, but then I had to create a character, because you don't just create a story around an event, you have to make it personal. So I had to create a character. So that's where the research came in really handy because I didn't then have to go back and do all this research. Although I did end up doing a little additional research, but most of it was done that way. So you never know, you can write nonfiction and then you can go back and look at it and see, oh, okay, could this be turned into something, fictional? For example, I also wrote a book on Civil War weapons and strategies. That research could have led to a book like you were talking about, Simon, where I write about Civil War. I didn't do that, but I've done all the research. So if I want to do that at some point, maybe I could. What about you? Does research lead to you to do things very much, Mandy?
Research because of a book. So with my medieval fantasy trilogy, I needed to know about medieval. Luckily, because I'm English, it's sort of inbred into me, and I've lived it. But I had to go and look at medicines that they used,
Oh, yeah.
which became,
Yeah.
it's one of those little wormholes. Like, you start with one thing and it just leads you down this huge path, most of which you don't use, but I mean, it's interesting anyway. And then because I like to write in different genres, I have to look at what the genre specifically needs. Like with a steampunk one, I had to find out what the readers would actually expect within that book.
Mhm.
So there's certain things you have to include, and so the research can be about a specific thing or about what a reader expects.
Right. Yeah. Learning the
Yeah,
tropes for a specific
yeah,
genre. You don't know the tropes. You
absolutely.
don't know what they expect. And you can write something that you think is a great story, but somebody that knows that specific genre
Mhm.
and the tropes will say, yeah, this just doesn't make the mark, it just doesn't do it. So yeah, you have to kind of know what you're doing there too. So that's interesting. Yeah, research comes out in just all kinds of ways. Then
It is interesting with the research. It's like if I'm it's like if in science fiction stories, even though there's the word there, fiction, it's not real, but
right.
you've got to make sure that the some scientific device seems plausible to the reader, and it's the same thing with say with time travel stories that I've done and things and everything. If someone's got a time travel device, it's like in one of my books, you've got. The main character, he travels in time through paintings in a museum, which
Oh,
means he can step through the painting in the present day and step out of it in a different time period. But
oh,
the
that's
painting doesn't
cool.
move around,
Yeah.
so the painting is like a doorway. And
Oh,
in one of the more recent ones, the kid flips a coin and goes back to World War II. But if he loses that coin, he's going to be in big trouble. And
mhm.
he can keep it's something he can keep in his pocket. He's not carrying around a wardrobe or something with him, you
Right.
know. But
Yeah.
but it's interesting what Mandy said about medicine there and things like that. Because when I wrote another book set in the Middle Ages in the time of the Black Death, and in that one I had to I didn't think I knew all about it. But I thought, well, I'm familiar with this period at the time. I know I can write this story, but there was an awful lot I didn't know, because obviously they didn't have modern medicines at the time, but they had medicines that some of them, even if they didn't cure the plague, they were able to help people in their final moments or things like that. And these were medicines that were derived from plants and things like that. But I had to do a lot of research into what was available at the time.
Right. Yeah. That you bring up a good point too. I did a middle grade novel where the main character lived in a Japanese American internment camp of World War II. And when I was creating the story about, he's a little boy, like 12 years old. And so, I just kind of described him in what I saw my kids wearing, they blue jeans and a t-shirt or whatever. But when it came back for me to look through, the edits from my editor, they had marked that blue jeans were not around then. They didn't come into play till later. So, you have to be really careful, either have somebody vet your manuscript like that, which is a good idea because you can make a mistake like that. And then what happens is you lose credibility with your readers because they're going to go, she didn't even know they didn't have blue jeans back then. What else did she make up that doesn't really go in with that time period? So research is really, really crucial. Now you mentioned too, Mandy, about conversations, and I know um, Simon spends a lot of time, not a lot probably, but some. He goes to coffee shops because he likes to write there. And so I'm sure you overhear people talking, and you mentioned about how a snippet of conversation might come into your stories. Anything else that you get when you're relying on real people? Do you ever use real people to create your characters from any of their traits or things?
So, I mean, so sometimes you just see someone that they dress a particular way, or they sound a particular way, or they move a particular way, and I mean that all helps you build a character because you can, although you see them in your own mind's eye, you
Mhm.
have to translate that to the narrative.
Right.
So it's something that from my last book. I mean, it was a Western romance, but it's about a barrel racer.
Oh.
I've never been barrel racing. I have no clue. So I was really lucky because I connected with a champion barrel racer, and she helped me with all the ins and outs of, the type of horse they use and
Oh.
traveling the rodeos and the actual pattern they use in the race. And that's vital for me because then I get a real essence of someone that does that for a living.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like having um like a brain feed basically, because you're absorbing someone else's knowledge so that you can use it. And I think that's the fun of writing, because for us, we can find people, places, circumstances, and create something out of it.
Yeah.
And you have all these people in your head all the time, and it's like, you finish the book, but the characters stay with you. It's like having an old friend. Sometimes they're like a new friend, and sometimes they're like old school friend that you haven't seen for decades. But they're still in your head, and they'll stay there probably forever. And that's what I like about absorbing knowledge and experiences and places, and that helps with the making your narrative as real as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, another thing that happens though that we can help writers with is many times writers get a great idea, they get going, and then they get stuck.
Yeah.
So, Simon, what do you do when you're writing and you get stuck? Maybe you're just not getting any new ideas and you're midway through the book and you don't know what needs to happen now. How do you work your way out of that?
Oh, I never get stuck. I'm always, always fine. Everything's fine. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you later then.
No, no. With writer's block, it does happen. I mean, it's with all these wonderful ideas that we get. Sometimes I'll get more ideas than I can handle in an afternoon, But then I sometimes won't have any decent ideas for 6 months at a time, and it starts to get a bit worrying, really. But normally with things like writer's block, I will. I mean, right now I've got one that I'm close to finishing, and another couple that are well on the way to being. They're in development, sort of thing. And everything, but there are other ones where I've just got little bits and pieces here and there. And what I will do sometimes with writer's block, I will. You'd mentioned me and coffee shops. I've got a coffee shop that's very close here, and sometimes I will go there without a laptop or anything, just with pen and paper, and work out something that I'm stalled with. I mean, with this latest one, I would occasionally be stalled for 3 or 4 months at a time, and I just put it to one side and work on something else. And sometimes it will be something completely unrelated to writing. It might even be errands and things like that, to be honest. I could be out walking the dog and get it. Oh, wait a minute. That's a good idea. Maybe I should do that. And so sometimes for me, it's like doing something else,
Oh,
and thinking, right, I'm too frustrated with this. I'm going to put it to one side, and come back to it later. Simple as that.
yeah, you know what works the best for me? Vacuuming. If I'm stuck on something, I go vacuum the house. It used to be my husband would come home and he'd say, "Wow, you must have had trouble writing today. Everything looks really great."
Uh,
But that just helps. I know another writer, she goes and takes a shower. So you're right, doing something completely different, often helps. Another thing I've noticed that if I get stuck midway through a story, it usually means I don't know the characters as well as I should. So I'm not quite sure what they would do or how they would react. So I might go back to the character profiles I created before I started writing, and I'll add to those, or I interview my characters. I don't know if either one of you do that, but I sit down and I just act like, there's a character sitting across from me, and I'd say, "Well, Mandy,
well,
what did you do when you were in high school? Did you have a job or blah, blah, blah?" And then you'd answer. In my head, I'd answer like that character. And I've many times gotten information where I thought, "Oh, yeah, she worked for her dad when she was in high school. He had a fishing boat. She learned how to tie knots. She'll be able to tie the knot that will do such and such, da 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 da." Well, I wouldn't have come up with that when I was vacuuming. But if I ask them questions, then, I kind of learn it. So, do you have some tricks like that you use, Mandy?
If I get stuck, which I have to say is very rare, I go to writing prompts,
Oh,
because it
okay.
refreshes my mind into something completely different. So I'm not, no, obsessing about why can't I get this character to do this, that, and the other. And I think if you just, go for a walk or just find something else to do, just think, okay, I'm going to call a friend, we're going to go for a walk, or we're going to go for lunch, or just to sort of get you out of the pattern of sitting there worrying. And I think that helps you stop blocking yourself, because you've sort of completely come away from it. And I think if you just sit there and go worry, 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 then you're not going to get anywhere at all. I think you have to sort of think, right, do something completely different. And I mean, I love prompts. I mean, people say, oh, well, aren't they a bit boring? I said, well, not really, because they can be a string of words, they can be a picture, they can be a starting sentence, they could be a title, and something will click with you with that. You don't have to use the first one you see. You can think, oh, I'll go through several and see which one. And I mean, I've got like a huge folder on my computer that's like full of writing pieces that are like pieces of a prompt, and I've responded to them. And sometimes I go back and think, when did I do that one? Because there's so many of them, and I can't remember what the prompt was if I haven't written it. And I'm thinking, that's pretty cool. I like that.
I know. Usually we'll think, hey, that's pretty good. I wrote that.
Well, you've also got the one thing that we should mention here, of course, is the famous what if exercises.
Right.
Now, and I have some notes here. I even have some notes here about that. See, for example, what if you received a letter informing you of your acceptance into a school for wizards?
Okay.
Or discovered a door into another universe at the back of your bedroom closet? Or a flying boy dressed all in green appeared at your bedroom window inviting you to take a journey to a magical land? Or you followed a rabbit down a hole and ended up in a bizarre underground universe? Or what if you could met someone who'd been imprisoned inside a painting for over 300 years? Or if you could travel back in time, where would you go? Or what if Germany conquered and occupied Britain early in World War II? Now, whether this is where the Harry Potter or the Chronicles of Narnia or Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland or the Alchemist's Portrait or the Order of Excalibur first came about, that's not the point. It's more about how this type of thinking sets the everything in motion. Now, there's these other ones that are a bit less specific. For example, you might have one like he turned the corner and couldn't believe it when he saw.
So that's
Or I went to collect. I went to collect the mail and saw a letter from. Or behind the bookcase was a small mysterious door. I mean, some of this is not going to, it might not lead you to create a classic, but it starts you off on the writing, and sometimes you might carry on with it, and sometimes, as Mandy says, you might only get so far and think, yeah, I'm not that interested in that at all, and but you might come back to it later, and you might not. I've got quite a few of those where I look at the title of it, and I'm familiar with the title. And I think, well, oh, I remember writing that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but I haven't opened the document for a long time. And I think, well, yeah, I don't think it's that interesting. But it was interesting what you mentioned about the Japanese internment camps. I came across that. I was familiar with it. And I came across that when I was doing some research for my recent World War II one. I came across it in there when I was writing the book, and I thought, well, is this going to be part of this adventure in here? It turned out not to be in the end, but I haven't abandoned the idea. I'm thinking, yes, I'll keep it. But it was interesting too what you'd mentioned about blue jeans not being around in a certain era. It's like sometimes people have sent me stories to edit and review and give feedback on or something, and it might be somebody in the Middle Ages, and they're using the word okay and they're from the Middle Ages. I mean, they don't have to be talking like they're from a Shakespeare
Right,
play,
right.
but they're not going to say, "Okay, we can do that." When they're living in 1487 or something, it's just not going to be happening.
Yeah, I think TV kind of has messed that up because you'll see some television shows now that take place in periods like that, and you think, I don't think they talk like that back then, but they don't seem to worry about it because they figure kids will, if it's a show for kids, they'll relate to it nowadays. But yeah, you're right. That throws me off when I know they wouldn't have said those kind of things back in a certain time or whatever. Well, I think we've given people all kinds of ways to get ideas. A couple of things I wanted to mention too for nonfiction ideas. And Mandy, you said you are a freelance writer, so you've probably written magazine articles and blog posts for people and things like that, which I've done a lot of as well. And I always find if I'm at a loss for, what could I query a magazine about? What kind of idea can I come up to write for them? What I do is I go to the bookstore and I go to the magazine racks and I just sit there and I make a list of all the titles of articles I see on the magazines. And what that does is it kind of lets me see how so many of the articles have numbers in the titles, like 10 ways to do such and such, 5 steps to do such and such. So then I think, okay, I can create something around that. So that gives me some ideas. What else do I do for nonfiction? Oh, blog posts. If I'm coming up with blog posts, and I coach a lot of writers to build their author platform by creating a blog. And then they go, well, what do I blog about? I don't even have a book out yet. What could I possibly blog about? And I always suggest if you're having trouble creating content for a blog, what you should do is come up with about 4 to 5 categories of information that you can write about. And then what you do is each week or whatever, I say 5 categories because then you could just blog maybe once a week and you'd have an extra because sometimes there's 5 weeks in the month. But let's say you're going to we're going to write a book review, one blog post a month. Then okay, this Monday I'm supposed to write a book review. So you go find a book to review. Maybe another month or another week or category, you're going to interview an author. So you've got to find somebody to interview that month. It makes it so much easier to come up when you've got an editorial calendar that's just your categories, and then you can fill those in because I always meet authors that have written books and all these things that are very involved and take a while to write, and they act like a blog post is the same way. And I tell them, you're making blogging too complicated. You can sit down and write a blog post in 15 minutes. And if you can't, you are not doing it correctly because if you're trying to get books out, you don't want to spend most of your time writing blog posts. You want to spend most of your time writing books, right? So you've got to learn how to do that quickly. So sometimes, how you come up with ideas help you when you create a system for coming up with the ideas, that will help you come up with the ideas as well. Okay, let's see. How do you keep track of all your ideas?
Right. Well, actually, I was going to ask both of you this, Mandy first, probably, because she hasn't spoken for a while here, but about outlines and planning and things, because this is something that helps me. It's not every writer doesn't work this way, and I probably didn't for my first one, and that's why I learned how to do it next time because it took I thought, well, I've got the idea. I just need to sit down and write this book about this kid who travels in time through paintings and everything. But it took too long to write it and change it around with the publisher and everything because I didn't have a plan and an outline. And I think the publisher might have insisted or suggested I have an outline for the second one. And I found it worked very well for me. And then I could take sections of the story. When I was getting writer's block and things in, say, chapter 15 or the ending or whatever it was, I could print that off on paper and take it to the coffee shop and just work on the story in chunks.
Mhm.
So I found it worked very well for me. So Mandy, do you have outlines for stories before you make a start or at any point during the story?
of the time, no. What I do is I have the story and I just go through it, just flow through it. Occasionally, if there's something particular, like I've got a crime trilogy I'm working on, and because it's 3 books, I have to plan. And I had to work backwards because the last book has the solution to something. So I had to work back the amount of years till I got to first book. So that I had to make sure that it was chronologically correct, that, the last book would be the correct year for that discovery. But I find that because my brain just works on my characters carrying me through, I just let them lead me. And then obviously in the editing stage, things get changed or not changed. But I find for me, free flowing works better. But as I say, occasionally, no, I can't do that. I mean, obviously, non-fiction, I can't do that because I'm working with someone and they want it in a particular way. With a marketing book, there's certain ways you have to designate each chapter. So then you have to plan it. But for my own writing, I just like to enjoy the process and go through it like a movie.
Yeah, I outline everything because I have to know where I'm going, and then I kind of figure. So if I'm going to plan a book, I usually plan out what the first chapter is going to be and what the last chapter is going to be. And
Oh,
then I
right.
kind of work my way to the middle and outlining it so that, I know I've built up the plot points in the right places, the pinch points in the right places, the midpoint comes, right that where it's supposed to be, the climax, all that kind of stuff are in the right location. And then I find it easier to write. But what I like about what you said, Mandy, and I should do more of this, is you let the characters lead you. So, and then you rework it maybe later to get it in the right order or get everything right exactly where it's supposed to be. So, I could probably try that a little bit and see if that would work for me as well. And maybe it would be more, um, you know, just uh, easier to write that way because sometimes I'm finding out, okay, I need to have something happen here. What can happen? But if you're just worried about the characters and what they're doing, it would probably be easier. So,
I enjoy it because sometimes the characters go in a completely different direction. And
right,
I'm thinking, I didn't even think of that. Well, I must have thought about it
right.
because
Yeah,
subconsciously, but the characters going, I'm not doing that. I'm doing something else. And
yeah.
it's like sometimes you're starting with one character and thinking this is the one I'm going with, and then someone else says, no, I'm more important. I, I I'm the one you should be writing about. I mean, that happened in my steampunk. I started with a man who was a toy maker,
Oh,
and it was like a short story about 7,000 words. But I thought, well, I'll base a novel on him. But as it turned out, my female character, Oena, decided, no, you should be talking about me. It's my story. And he became like a side character, like halfway through the book, which was bizarre because I thought he'd be the one. So,
yeah.
I mean, you can never, I mean, I don't like to restrict myself on where the story goes or who's the main character because someone can become more interesting. They're more developed somehow. And you
Mm,
think, no, that's the way I should go.
yeah.
That's the fun of writing for me.
And
No.
that was the thing for me. Even though I said I outline things, and I'm asking both of you if you outline things, I don't. I'm a bit of a mixture of all this stuff as well because with that latest one I mentioned to you, it was really the one that's more or less completed as we sort of head into the spring here. That was like a free flowing thing, sometimes on the computer at home, sometimes at the coffee shop, and then the more or less the entire second half of it was I was getting stalled on and everything, and I wrote outlines at various stages of the second part. So whether that would be defined as, oh, he outlines all his books, well, not really. I mean,
Well, yeah, I don't
because
think
with that,
outlining
it was
necessarily
just the
has.
second half.
Yeah,
Yeah,
outlining doesn't necessarily have to be a formal outline either. I just kind of
no,
sketch out what I'm going to do. It might not be, Roman numeral number one, A, B, that kind of stuff. I'll do that. But I'd ask earlier where you put your ideas, how you do them. Now I just use a notebook that I can take with me, and I even have a little one in my purse, and I jot down ideas all the time. And then I've got a bigger one where I keep stuff. But I want to caution people watching this video today that when you get an idea for something, make sure when you write it down, you include enough detail about what your idea is. See if either one of you have ever had this experience. One time I was so excited about a story I was going to write about, and it had something to do with cigars and an adult having cigars and a kid got a hold of them or something. But all I wrote in my notebook was cigars. I went back to that idea later and I thought, well, what was that about? I can't even. And I was so disappointed because I had been so excited when I initially got the idea, but it had totally evaporated after, time went by. So if you keep ideas on an app or notebook or whatever, don't just write a one-word description of what you're hoping to write about, even if it's, man travels to the future in a painting. Maybe put some more things there that'll get it easier for you to start writing that story. And Simon, you mentioned you've got several things, maybe you jotted down an idea and you never went back and wrote them. Maybe you should have written a little bit more about them at the time. And when you went back to it, you'd be more excited to continue it. I don't know. But have either of you ever done that? Lost an
that
idea?
would be that would depend. I mean, most of the time these days, I would be very much a note. I had notebooks and things in the past and everything. In this, I suppose, as technology has advanced and things like that, sometimes I'll have an idea before bedtime, and I'll send myself an email. And
Oh,
if like you, if it was one word that was like cigars, or if it was like this kid traveling in time through paintings, I might just have sent myself an email that either said paintings or museum, just one word, and that would be it. And as long as the next morning, I'm going to see this email in my inbox, and I'm going to think, oh, I'd usually remember I'd sent this to myself, and then I tap away at the keyboard and add it to one of the documents I've got or something else somewhere. As long as it wasn't too long. What I find is if I have an idea, if I'm out and about and I write something down on paper in my local coffee shop, if I don't get home quickly and type it up, I won't be able to read my own writing because my thought process has been I've had to write it down so quickly to get it out of my head onto the paper. So it depends on how long it is from the idea emerging.
sending yourself an email, that's a good idea.
Yes, because then you'll, especially if it's just one word, it's like paintings, or it's like it's like something, or cigars in
Well,
your case,
I'd
and
say do
then
more than one word because cigars would not have done me any good. That's what I had, whether it was on my phone as an email or whatever. Now, maybe one word works for you because you go back to it right immediately. Whereas, I put it in a notebook and it was months later that I looked at the word and I thought, I don't know what I was thinking of. So, do you keep your idea?
the dream ones that the dream ideas, factors that
Oh,
we've discussed in this session as well. Sometimes I've had recurring dreams. Sometimes I've had the same dream quite often for a week at a time. But as we know that that is usually just before you wake up, and it's usually very clear and very it resonates quite a lot, but then it's gone very quickly, hasn't it? A dream, oh, I wish I could remember more about that, and it would, and maybe there's something there, maybe there isn't.
well,
So
I've heard if
hard to
you
say.
write it down at that point and just sit there like you're journaling, that more will come back to you. You'll remember more. So maybe sit there when you wake up and say, "Oh, I had this dream," that could turn into something, or I don't know, and sit down and just journal it out. And maybe more will come back from your mind. Because I've had that too, where I've had a dream that's very vivid. And I just remember one section of it. And then later, I'm sitting there and more starts coming back to me. But unlike you guys, it never turns into a story. So, you're on mute, Mandy.
Inside my bed, because if I don't, then I'm going to lose it. Because you'll get up and make a cup of tea, and then you think, oh God, what was the dream? Now I've forgotten it. So I write it as soon as I literally wake up. And the other thing I do, I always have a notebook with me in my purse, and I also have a big book that I use when I go on road trips, because sometimes you can be just sitting, not thinking about any sort of writing whatsoever. You're just enjoying nature, and then you're driving somewhere and you're thinking, well, that would be really cool. I mean, this happened to me last year. We were in Jasper, and for whatever reason, I mean, I wasn't even thinking about this book at the time because it's like a back burner book. And I'm just thinking, I had an idea for the first 2 chapters to change them entirely.
Oh, wow.
And I was just thinking, well, where did that come from? Because I hadn't been thinking about it. It just came into my head. So then I'm definitely, scribbling to make sure that I know exactly what these chapters are going to be about. So like my first chapter, original chapter, is now chapter 3,
Wow.
because I've got 2 new ones. So I think it's very important that as soon as that sort of realization, that idea comes into your head, try and find a way of capturing it. I mean, I know a lot of people, they'll use the recording on their phone and they'll just speak it into the phone so they've got it.
Right.
So, I mean, there's lots of different devices to use to make sure that you don't lose it, because you will lose it. And sometimes, you dream something and, well, I'll remember it later. Well, you don't.
No, you
It's
never do.
And I've done that before as well. I've recorded a thing. I haven't done it recently, but at one point I used to when my children were younger, I'd drop them off somewhere, and I'd have to wait for a while before I was going to pick them up and bring them home again and things. But I wasn't going to be out. They weren't going to be doing things for long enough for me to come all the way back home. So I had to go and run some errands or do something while I was out. And so I would record things in voice memos in my phone, 15, 20 minutes. And that sometimes would just be me rambling on about something. I've still got 4 or 5 of them in my phone that are probably about 20 minutes long. Some of them about stories that have since been published, and some that are just nothing much going on there. But one of the reasons why I don't have a notebook like you two ladies do is I don't carry a purse, of course, with me.
It
So
can
that's
be a
why
very
I have
small one you put in your back
Yeah, I've
pocket,
got a
Simon.
little bitty one like that.
Yeah.
I put in the pocket when I walk. Well, listen, we've been here over half an hour, so I don't want to make this so long that people won't want to watch the whole thing. So one last thing I want to emphasize is that ideas are just the beginning. Execution is what really matters. A small idea developed well is worth more than a big idea that's poorly executed. So Simon, that we're going to end on that. Do you have any else thing to say about that? You want to do that next time? Talk about how we turn our ideas into well thought out stories?
I think we certainly could. I mean, we've got an awful lot of topics that we can work on, and I know we're both thinking that this has been very helpful to people with the tips and advice and everything. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. So before I let you go, Mandy, just tell us, where can people find you and your books online?
This way is just to put in my full author name, which is Mandy Eve-Barnett. You can find me on my blog, so that's www.mandyevebarnett.com.
Okay.
And the books are on all the online purchase. They're in my local libraries, they're in several bookstores, so you can find me around Alberta.
Okay, okay. And Simon, tell us your website. Where do we find you?
Well, just of course, and of course with Mandy though, of course, we'll be putting stuff on the all the details on the site and everything, where as well as it won't just be Mandy telling us all about it. We'll have things on there as well
Right.
where they can find it. People can find me at www.simon-rose.com, and that's my website and. As details of all the books and things like that. I have a blog. I'm on social media and all the other usual places. So yes, I'm. Don't be a stranger online.
Okay. And you can find me at writebythesea.com. And also, I would encourage any of you who want to write, and maybe you're having trouble doing that, sign up for my free weekday newsletter. It comes out it's not really a newsletter, it's just little tips, Monday through Friday, called the Morning Nudge. And you can sign up for it at morningnudge.com. Okay. So until next time, everybody, thank you for being with us today, Mandy. Good insights and tips you've given us. Thank you, Simon, for joining me. And everybody, keep writing, keep observing, and keep asking, what if? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Happy writing, everyone.
Bye.